Hello and welcome to the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss. And today, as you can tell by the title of this episode, we're joined by a special guest. We'll get into that introduction here in a minute. But first, I want to make sure you guys are aware that this episode is co-hosted by Bryan Smith. Bryan, how's it going, man?
Good. Happy to be here.
It's you're back for episode number 3, or this is your 3rd episode, right?
Yep.
So now we're really hitting our stride. I would hope at this point.
Now we're bringing interesting people on instead of just having us babble.
Exactly. So I don't know if you want to kick it to our guest here today.
Yeah, we are stoked to bring on the guy that one of his teammates told me has the best gloves in the organization, and one of the top pitching prospects in the organization as well, Jordan Wicks. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Nike hooks it up for you pretty good?
They do a good job, and I got probably the best 2 coming this season too. So it's just trending up from here.
Very nice.
I love it. All right, man. So I let you know before we started recording here that we're gonna lead off with some rapid fire questions. We like to do these just to kind of open up the show. They're kind of quirky. Some of them are have nothing to do with baseball in any way, shape, or form, but we figured that'd be the best way to kind of lead off the show. Are you I think we got 8 of them here.
Let's roll.
All right. We're gonna lead off with, who is your favorite catcher to throw to?
Ooh, Casey Opitz. It's probably a tie. I would say Opitz and Winson in AA. Winson was fun to throw to. I
feel like we've heard that a lot about Winson.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What is the strangest autograph seeker that you've ever experienced?
Oh man, that's a good one. I would probably say in Chattanooga, we played about a 4.5-hour game into extra innings, about 13 innings. And there were 3 guys that still were sitting there after the game wanting autographs. And I signed for them purely because I felt bad that they sat there and watched that entire 4.5-5-hour game.
Did you start that game?
No, thank God. It would have felt like I threw 2 days ago.
So you understood how long it was just to watch it.
Yeah,
exactly. We've gotten feedback from a lot of different players over the years, but who is the biggest trash talker teammate of yours?
Oh, it's Opitz for sure, 100%. Opitz is the comedian of the team, but it's such a dry sense of humor that you can never, if you don't know him, you can't tell when he's joking or when he's serious, but it's definitely Opitz.
Who is the best golfer in the organization? You can say yourself.
In the organization. That's a tough one because I haven't golfed with a lot of the guys. It's not me, I can tell you that. It's definitely not. Oh man. I've heard Tompy's pretty good. Cole Franklin, for not playing as much as he does, he can swing it.
I heard he can bomb it off the tee.
Oh, he can swing it.
Yeah. All right. If you got a full season worth of at bats at the plate, how many times would you go yard?
Oh, jeez. Maybe once.
Maybe once. That's all the confidence you have in yourself. Is
that's
one time?
All the confidence I have.
So you were pro DH.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Bryan. I'll kick it to you.
Yeah. Complete this sentence, Jordan. The Cowboys will win the Super Bowl if what happens?
As soon as I stop being a fan, they will win the Super Bowl. That's how those things work. Because because I was a Braves fan growing up my entire life, I get drafted by the Cubs, so now I'm a Cubs fan. They win the World Series the next year. That's how it works.
Sure. All right. Well, you got married this winter. Congratulations. So did Greg. We got two newlyweds here. But 1 out of 10. Grade your performance on the dance floor at the wedding.
6.
Nice. That's a good thing to be. Nobody's looking
average.
at you. You're not making too much of a scene. You're just
Cole Franklin was about a 9 at my wedding though. It was hilarious.
That does not surprise me at all.
All right, and then last one. What is like the biggest just difference you noticed quickly between high A and double A hitters?
I felt like it was a lot easier their approach. The approach at the plate is just the simple one-word answer without getting too far into it.
Sure.
That's fair. All right. Well, that's it for rapid fire questions. You did them pretty smoothly, but I want to get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the episode here. I want to lead off with something that I got to experience when I was watching you play. You pitched in Peoria, and I didn't get the chance to go to a whole lot of games in person this year, but I watched you throw in Peoria. You went 5 innings, 1 hit, 10 strikeouts. It was one of your best outings of the season. And I was sitting there back behind home plate watching it happen, and as soon as the game ended, you went and were signing autographs for every single person right by the dugout who was asking for them. So I want to hear from you, I guess, what that relationship with fans means in your eyes, and how important it is to have that good relationship.
I think it's huge, because I remember when I was a kid, so we have the Travelers right down the road here, which is like 30 minutes from where I live, and I used to go to Travelers games all the time. And I remember I used to look up like the top prospect lists before I'd go to the games and see who was at the games and, try and get those guys autographs. And so I understand, especially the kids, where the kids are coming from and, who they want to see. And so, I think it's really cool to, appreciate them as much as they appreciate us. Because they don't have to come to minor league baseball games. Like minor league baseball games aren't the most glamorous thing. Like, and those people do it because they love baseball. And so I feel like giving back to them is, exactly what needs to happen. And I remember when I was a kid going to the Travelers game, watching Mike Trout when he was in Double-A here with the Travs. And it was, I just was so amazed at how he carried himself and, the kind of person that he was. And, probably still is. Obviously, I don't know him now, but, and so that's kind of the level I try to give back to them as much as they give to us.
That's pretty sick that you got to see Mike Trout in the minor leagues play. Not a whole lot of people have seen that.
Fastest human being I've ever seen. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I saw him in the Futures game in now his home park when he was still in the minors, and he was, hitting the rocks out there in batting practice like it was no thing. He's incredible stuff. After that start, Jordan, you got promoted. That was your last high A start. So I'm curious, how long after that start did they tell you? Was it that night that it was pretty clear it was time for you to move on, or was it a couple days later?
No, it was a couple days later. I can't remember who started that day, but someone else started. It was like after my bullpen, so it was like midweek. I threw my bullpen in Peoria. And then after that day's game, DJ and I both got promoted, and it was actually kind of crazy because like my mom and fiance at the time, now my wife, were in town for the Peoria series, and so we got back to the hotel, and I was like, we got to pack up our stuff. I got promoted, and obviously they were all excited, and my mom stayed the night in Peoria one more night. We had to drive back to South Bend, so I had my truck in Peoria. And so me, DJ, and my fiance drove back to South Bend that night. We got in late, got up the next morning, packed everything up, and then me and my fiance drove, and DJ came down a little later. But my mom drove from Peoria down to Knoxville for that, and because I was starting that Sunday right before the All-Star break.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was cool.
How cool was it to be promoted up at the same time as DJ? I mean, you guys were both tearing it up in high A, but for you guys both to get the call at the same time is pretty sweet.
Yeah, we joke about it all the time that, I guess the two of us aren't allowed to be at one level without the other one because, he was in high A one day before I was at the end of the 21 season, and then we both went up to Double-A the same day this season. So we were laughing and joking about that.
I love that.
Yeah. So when you were with South Bend this year, like the first maybe, I don't know, month and a half, I think there was a time your ERA was like 4.5. You were sort of allowing, I think, a little more than a hit an inning. And I remember writing about it and feeling like it was mostly bad luck, that the stuff looked really good. I saw you in spring. It was really good. and that it always sort of felt like that hot streak was coming, and it did. I'm curious, to you at that time, did it feel to you like you were off a little bit, or did it feel like, hey, the balls are squeezing through a little bit and I'm just having some bad luck?
I think it was definitely the bad luck part of it for me. I didn't take any of it too seriously, because a lot of it, there just wasn't anything, there wasn't anything I could do about it. I remember there was one point in the season where I had broken 7 bats and 5 of them were for hits. And so they were hitting like something just absolutely stupid on broken bats. And, I think like 2 of those were for like 2 RBI singles with like 2 outs in the inning. And so it's just like we would sit there and I'd come in after my outing, and TC, who was our pitching coach at the time, would be sitting there and he was like, I don't know what to tell you. And he's like, we would always joke about that, we need to get a Joe Boo for my locker, or, sacrifice a chicken or something. But, because we just couldn't catch a break. But no, TC would always tell me, he'd be like, just keep rolling. He's like, it'll flip. Just keep rolling.
I mean, you're probably super frustrated at the time as that's happening, obviously, because you made your pitch, you did what you needed to do to get the out. At what point, like, is it after the game is over where you're like, well, like I did everything I could, or is it in the moment too? You realize that you're doing your job.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, obviously, it's extremely frustrating just because of how competitive of a person I am, and how badly I want to win those games and pitch well for the team, and and the funniest thing is me and Franklin lived together in high A, and there was a stretch where the both of us just could not catch a break. And so we would come back to the apartment and we'd be like, maybe we need to move. Maybe we need to get out of this apartment. Like, this is just, And so it was pretty funny.
I got to imagine that's where having pitched in sort of big time conference college baseball helps, because you've probably taken your licks before and you've seen that if you just trust the process for a whole season, it helps, right? Yeah,
absolutely. I've faced extremely high level competition and been challenged by it, been hit around. And so, it's something to where, like, me getting hit around one outing is not going to change, like, my confidence in who I am as a pitcher. Like, it's not going to. I still know what I do really well, who I am, and, it doesn't really change what I do.
I was going to ask you about who you lived with, who your roommates were. It sounds like Cole Franco is one of them. You got any stories on Cole that you can share on the podcast?
Oh, okay. I was about to say, then we limit it a little bit. No, but we so I got him into MLB The Show this year for the first, like, he had never really played like the Diamond Dynasty side of it, and I'm a huge Diamond Dynasty guy. My team's always, really good. I always play online. And we would run, the new feature this year is the co-op. So you can play like you and like a couple other guys. And we would run, it would either be me, Franklin, and Jensen playing, or it'd be me, Franklin, and Justin Steele. And it would be every time, and he was terrible online for the first like month or two. And so it would literally be, you'd get up there and me and Steele would hit bombs, and it'd be like every out of the inning was Franklin, or like every whatever. We'd give him so much crap for it, but then he got a lot better, and so it was a lot of fun throughout the year.
I love it. So you talk about the bad luck or good luck or things, the bad luck turning around, I guess. I'm curious about your like game day preparation, right? From the moment you get to the ballpark to the moment you throw that first pitch. Does that change depending on how the groove you're in during the season, or is that just every single day is the same process on your start days?
Every single day is the same process. I do certain stuff, like it'll change a little bit in the training room. Like if I'm, like there was one point where like my quads were a little bit tight, and so I'd stretch those a little bit longer. Like that stuff changes just based on, how the body feels, but it's always like minor stuff. The big parts of it's the same. The catch play is the same. I show up about 2.5 hours before. I'll normally eat something, kind of hang out around. But yeah, that stuff all pretty much stays the same.
Baseball players are creatures of habit for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, This year, I think the Cubs probably had you throw more breaking balls than you ever had to in college, and the slider has obviously come a really long way. What was it like to just sort of figure out what the right pitch mix was for you, and to kind of go through the process of making sure that you're not just leaning too hard on the stuff that you've always had success with?
Yeah, and that's another portion of like the beginning or the first half of the season is how do you incorporate these two new weapons that you have without losing your identity of who you always have been and who you are. And so that was the first half was a lot of learning. I shouldn't have thrown this in this count. I shouldn't have thrown this to this guy. When do I use the curveball? When do I use the slider? And the other thing that was a big part of it for me was the Cubs they have like suggested models of like how much you should be throwing like each pitch, and obviously that's not like set in stone. Like I'm not sitting up on the mound like, oh, I've only thrown this amount. I've got to. Yeah. It depends on the game, and so but learning which situations are best for which pitch, is something that took a little bit, and that's why I think a lot of the takeoff the second half of the season was because I got a lot more comfortable with when to use that stuff, and I got a lot more comfortable with the grips, especially into this offseason where it's the first offseason where I haven't been, changing anything.
I was going to say, it felt like, I mean, from my perspective, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like early on in the season you weren't using your changeup quite as much as you were trying to integrate the slider and curveball a little bit more. Yep. And then once you kind of got a better feel for those, then the changeup came back as the season wore on. Was that a concerted effort you had to do that, or am I just imagining things?
Yeah, I think it was, a lot of early on in the season, you have these shiny new toys and you want to show everybody like, I can do this. And then, you kind of get into, okay, now I've got a comfortable feel for it. Now I've got to stick with who I am and, still be confident and still do what I've always done. And so, yeah, it just kind of naturally, went that way.
We mentioned that Peoria Start, just for the listeners, one of my favorite starts of the year because of the stat. When I was watching back the game, I was charting your pitches, and every single changeup that was swung at in that game was a swing and miss. I think there was 10 or 11 swings, and every single one of them they missed on. And so that seemed like a real time where you'd sort of figured out the perfect way to use the changeup in addition to all the other things.
Yeah, and that was one of my favorite games. Opitz called that game and did an outstanding job. Slider and changeup mix, and knowing when to use what. Like we were getting swings and misses on everything: curveball, slider, fastball, changeup. It didn't matter that day. And so it was a lot of fun just, being able to, at that point feel like I had come into a comfort zone of when to use what and, all that sort of stuff.
I think it was on the Bain campaign with Bryan and Max. You talked about throwing your changeup and aiming to throw it down the middle and then letting it kind of fall off the table and hit the edges of the zone. Is that an approach you take with the slider and curveball as well, or is that something specific to the changeup?
It's something that's kind of specific to the changeup, just because I know with the action that it has and how well I'm able to hide it, because there's a lot of deception that I create wind-up wise or motion wise that helps that pitch even more. And it almost profiles a little bit, at least when you sit there and watch like the play catch. A lot of guys tell me it almost profiles more as like a splitter than an actual like changeup. Like it's got more of those traits to it. Mm-hmm. And so that's something I feel a lot more confident starting down the middle. The sliders and the curveball was just, I obviously have my keys for that. But, those were ones that I, started off being a little bit more careful with before I, became fully confident in them.
Usually guys that get as much sweep as you do off the slider don't throw good changeups because, the sweeper is generally a supination pitch and changeups are generally pronation pitches. I wonder, do you have a cue on the slider that makes it work for you? Is there something that you really focus on and that makes you able to get all that sweep?
Yeah, so one guy I've been talking to, and I talked to toward the end of last season, who's been helping me a lot. He's an Arkansas guy, is Cliff Lee. and he was with my bullpen, and we were talking, and he was like, you're a crossfire, and so it makes sense why you're able to get as much on your slider and your cutter as you can. And he was like, but he was sitting there and he couldn't understand how I was able to get as much action on my changeup as I was being as crossfire as I am. And so, it was kind of interesting to hear from him on that, about how he, would do certain stuff based on what pitch he's throwing and how it would, change based on the count or whatever. But yeah, so he talked to me a little bit about that and was, couldn't understand how I, got that much out of it.
I know that you started incorporating a little bit of a cutter into the mix in addition to all the other pitches you have. How do you decide on incorporating that cutter? And I guess that's my first question. I have several cutter questions, but that's my first question is how do you decide on incorporating that?
Yeah, it was after my what outing was it? It was Birmingham at home. And I went 4 innings, pitched good, and then gave up 2 kind of home runs in the last inning, which kind of made it worse than it was. And then I just I felt like everything was the same speed. You either had a fastball or you had the curveball, changeup, and slider were all kind of lumped together, and there wasn't anything moving up there toward the fastball velo. And so I was talking to the coordinators, and they were like, it's funny you mentioned that. We were actually going to have you start working on a cutter. And so I was like, that sounds great. And so I actually reached out to Cliff and asked, him for advice. And, he was awesome. He texted me and said, look, this is what I did. And I would send him videos in the bullpen and videos in the game of, what it was and how it was working. And, he would give me his feedback, and it's been a big help from him to be able to hear obviously a guy that had so much success in the big leagues, and just learning from how he used his was awesome.
Talk about a guy in Cliff Lee that had an insane peak of his career. I mean, he had several years there where he was insane in the big. So that's pretty cool to get to be able to talk with him. Is that cutter? Is that a pitch that is more of a weak contact pitch? Is that something that you're looking to get chases, or something to play off of your slider so you can throw the cutter in the zone and then throw the slider off of that cutter out of the zone? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a weak contact pitch, because what I found myself in the 4th inning, and I'm at 82 pitches, and I'm coming out immediately. And, I was having so much trouble just getting cheap outs, just weak contact. Cause, and it sounds, kind of arrogant to say, but I was getting a lot of swing and miss, which is great, but it also runs your pitch count up like crazy, and so you don't make it deep into games. And me, I've always been a starter, strikeouts are great. I don't really care. I want to go deep into the game and throw up zeros for as many innings as I can. That's just how I've always been. And so I needed something to kind of almost use it as a backwards sinker in a way. Sinkers generate a lot of ground balls, and my cutter did that too. My cutter generated a lot of ground balls. We got a lot more swing and miss than I honestly thought we would with it, but it's been really effective. We've gotten a lot of ground balls, and it's gotten even better this offseason. So,
Greg, I was always hopeful that Jordan would add the cutter, because there was always going to be people when he pitched in Wrigley for the first time that saw one person in particular that he reminded them of. And now that he's got a cutter, the Jon Lester comparison, there's just no turning back.
You were rocking number 34, right? This year? Have you always been number 34?
Everyone thought 34 was for Jon Lester. It actually wasn't, but I had one of my best friends was pitching in college, and he had TJ last year, and so I wore 34 was his number in college, and so I wore it kind of for him, so that way someone would get to wear it.
And you can play into the 34 Jon Lester comps a little bit more.
Yeah, and then the Cubs fans started going nuts, so I just kind of let them have, just think whatever you want to think. So.
We talked about the cutter. We talked about the slider. You mentioned the curveball too. I mean, you're rocking a lot of different pitches now, right? You got are you up to 6 different offerings now?
Yeah.
How do you kind of balance the trying to improve each pitch, trying to maintain what pitches are already really good, how do you balance the improving and perfecting all those pitches all at one time, I guess?
Yeah, it's, a lot of it's just in catch play. I don't throw really lengthy bullpens. I get a couple in with each. I use them while I'm playing catch. But it's just something to where, I still know which ones take priority, which ones are the most important, which ones are the most important to my success. And it kind of depends on who we're facing that day. I'll be watching hitters and I watch hitters on my own, because I like to kind of have my own idea of how I play into some of these guys. And like if we're playing a team that's stacked with righties, we're probably not going to use a whole lot of the two seam that day. We'll probably use a lot of the cutter, changeup, obviously, curveball. We might use the slider a lot, we might not. It depends. If we face a team with lefties, it could flip. Like some of these pitches are, they don't fit certain hitters, and I know that. And so I know going into it, like, okay, I'm facing these guys. So this week in the bullpen, I need to work on this, and this. And I can kind of let, whatever it is go. Or if I've been doing real good in a game with a certain pitch, I'm probably not going to work on it as much in the bullpen that week. I'm going to work on the other stuff that needs work.
I want to look at the end of your year because you had two really good starts to end the year, and then the Cubs shut you down, and Tennessee ended up playing in the playoffs. So I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about that decision to be shut down and just how sort of difficult it was, because I know that you're sort of an ultra competitor, not to participate in those playoffs.
Yeah, it was actually I didn't get shut down at the end innings wise. I had no bleach strain at the end of the year. Yeah. And so, it was one of those things where like it wasn't like a major thing, but it was just it was frustrating just because of the timing of it. You just had a couple, like we had the one start in Birmingham where it was just I had just like tricep tightness. Yeah. And everyone went nuts over the video that was posted, and it's literally just me trying to loosen up my tricep, just trying to get it like out of there. Everyone started freaking out about it, and I ended up having a little fun with it on Twitter, but at the expense of the Cubs fans. Sorry, guys. But I was like, I mean, if they're going to tweet that video, I'm going to, see what they think. And then I was on the mound like the next week. So, yeah, I enjoyed it.
Bryan, you got anything else over there?
I was curious if you could talk to us about, having a brother-in-law that's in such a similar spot in his career. I mean, you guys, it's developmentally, I mean, maybe he's just a little bit ahead because he got to the majors this year, but what it's like to have that in your family and how helpful it is.
Man, it's awesome. We actually we had bullpens yesterday, the both of us. And so we play catch all the time. You always have a throwing partner. He knows my stuff really well. I know his. I sit there and, we sit there and bounce ideas off each other. Like when COVID was happening, and nobody had a throwing partner, we long tossed with each other like every day. And I felt like we had such an advantage because we could continue to get our work in like normal and, even get a lot better. And so it's awesome just being able to, have someone to push you. And the great thing is he's 2 years older than me, was 2 years ahead in school. So I got to kind of see him go through stuff a couple years before I would. And so it kind of gave me like, okay, like, this worked for him, this didn't, and so it kind of gave me an ability to sit there and, know what to expect going into it.
I didn't say his name for the listeners. Evan Lee is Jordan's brother-in-law.
I feel like I'm required to ask. I've always got to ask. What are your goals going into next year, right? Or I guess now it's 2023 when we're recording this. So this season, what are your goals? Whether that's certain pitches, whether that's a certain level you get to, like, what are your goals going into the season?
Yeah, I mean, my goal doesn't change from last year. My goal is to get to Chicago and help us win games at the major league level. I made that goal last year, and people were kind of like, oh, there's no way. I mean, like, my bar doesn't change for me. Yeah. Like, that's the ultimate goal. I'm not really a guy for awards or accolades or little milestone, whatever you want to call them. Like, I don't really care. I've gotten second place about 4 times and 3 times in high school. And then we got second in Tennessee. I want to win something. I want to win the whole dang thing. And so, that's a day where, I'll be happy there. I'm not here for, the little personal stuff. Obviously I want to get to the big leagues and I want to help us win. And not saying like, minor league games aren't as important, aren't important to win. Like, obviously we all want to win the games and we all want to do that stuff, but like doing it at the big league level is completely different than doing it at the minor league level.
Much different dynamic for sure. Yeah. For sure. I feel like it's interesting because you mentioned that you're a starting pitcher, right? Like the kind of mindset, the way that you're going about and trying to eat innings and stuff like that too. I'm curious, the past 2 years, the Cubs have called up guys like Justin and Keegan Thompson and guys like that and kind of incorporated them into the major league level in the bullpen before bumping them back up into the rotation, which is not something the Cubs did several years ago before you were in the system. But I really dig that, right? Where it's if a guy's good enough to pitch in the big leagues, like he's good enough to pitch in you find a role, even if it's a multi-inning guy in the bullpen, and then eventually works his way back up to the rotation. I'm curious on a player's mindset on how difficult that might be, or how much you might appreciate that call, regardless of the role, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would be extreme. It would be a dream come true, no matter what the role is. Whatever they see me, helping the organization and helping the club, I would be all for that. I would honestly be kind of excited, like if it was a bullpen role. Like, I feel like it'd be something different. I hope they would allow me a couple in, AAA to maybe, get used to doing that, just to, kind of know the routine, because it is very different. But if I have to learn on the fly, I have to learn on the fly. I came in relief in spring training. Obviously that's a little different, but I mean, same sort of ordeal through 2 innings, and I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't, I was excited for it, and so if that's the opportunity that's given to me, I'm going to be extremely thankful for it, and I'm going to attack it head on.
Another thing that's changed in the Cubs organization, I think, just even since you've joined, is that I feel like prospects are more front and center than they've ever been. The Cubs did the Wrigley minicamp this year. They do the big prospect camp in Arizona during the off season. Mm-hmm. You guys have games being shown on marquee on TV, so people around the country can see it. A bunch of guys going to the Cubs convention next week. I mean, can you talk about just what it means to you guys to see the organization starting to shine a light on the guys in the minors and really allowing fans to sort of build relationships with you guys?
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I think it's something that not a lot of fan bases especially get to see, and I think it says a lot about Cubs fans, because I think it says a lot about their interest in the team, not only just this year but the future as well. Mm-hmm. And it says a lot about the intelligence of the fan, because just average fans aren't going to be able to look at minor league baseball and understand, they aren't going to be able to look at it and see, oh, he could do this in Wrigley. This is what he does. You know what? And so it takes someone who understands the game a little bit deeper and a little, more intense to understand that. And so I think it says a lot about that. But then it also, means a lot to us as the minor league guys to be able to see the big leaguers go through stuff. Like, we did that Wrigley camp, and we got to sit down and talk to some of the big league coaching staff. We got to talk to some of the players. And that was huge for us because, we get to sit there and we don't have to wonder about this stuff. They get to tell us what, you need to do this, and this. And so it was awesome.
I've got one more big one and then a quick hitter at the end here. But I guess I'm kind of curious about so, I mean, you might be starting the year up in Iowa. You might be in Tennessee. We don't know as of right now. But the potential starting rotation in Tennessee to start off the year next year is kind of insane, right? I mean, if you're there, DJ, but as you said, if you're there, DJ will be. If you're in Iowa, then DJ will be in Iowa. So, but Jensen, Devers, Palencia. I mean, there's Ben Brown might be there. There's a lot of dudes that might fill that rotation. You want to talk a little bit about how crazy that rotation might be in Tennessee to begin the year?
Yeah, I'm very interested at what they're, how it's going to shake out. We have a lot of extremely talented arms. And I'm excited. That's one of the things I love about spring training is you get to be there and you get to see everybody from like all the different levels play. Because when you're at an affiliate, obviously you miss like what happens at the other levels and getting to see them in person. And so that's what I love about spring training is just kind of everybody being in the same spot. But yeah, I'm extremely excited. Wherever I end up, because we have a lot of depth talent throughout the organization, and so I'm excited to see what they do with that. One guy I'm excited to meet because I haven't gotten to meet him yet is Wisniewski, who made such an impact in AAA and in the majors, and I've heard nothing but good things about him as a person and as a player, and so I'm hoping to get to meet him and talk to him, and I'm excited about that.
I mean, in the best way possible. He's kind of a psycho on the mound. I love it.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
You guys both have that competitive streak.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Brian, you got anything else before I finish off with the last question here?
Yeah, I'm just curious if you could give us a name of somebody that impressed you this year that you feel like doesn't get enough shine out there, that it flies under the radar a little bit. Just give someone some love.
That was actually my question, so I'm glad you asked it.
That flies under the radar. I think Slaughter's year flew under the radar quite a bit. You talk about a guy who handled a tough situation about as well as you can. I mean, didn't get sent out, was an extended spring training, didn't get sent out with a team right away, and then just turned it into, an unbelievable season. And just the ability to be able to handle that and, turn his season into what he could just says a lot about him as a person and as a player. I have a lot of respect for, what he's done. And this guy obviously gets all out of the respect in the world. But me as a pitcher couldn't love him more. But PCA in center field, if he's not an 80 grade field, then it doesn't exist. Like it doesn't. I don't care who you give me as center fielders defensively. I'll take PCA over any of them. Like he does, because I get to see it on a daily basis. And the stuff he does in BP, like how he catches, he runs full speed at a ball. He'll be running in a gap, and you think he'll catch it like normal, and he'll just reach behind his head and catch it behind his head full speed running in. I mean, it's like you
because he can
look at it and you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like it's unbelievable, and that's not even like half the incredible stuff he's done defensively. But he's and obviously he's a great hitter too. But me as a pitcher, I love the defensive side of it.
Yeah.
So.
I talked to Jordan Wogu the other day, and I said, tell me, like, as an outfielder, what is so special, like a small thing Pete does that's so special? And he actually said something kind of similar to what you just said, which is like his awareness of where his glove is versus where the ball is and how he can like sort of just operate his glove in space. He said it's just unbelievable.
It's ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, man. I got nothing else. Brian, you got anything else?
No, thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we can't thank you enough. Best of luck next year, no matter where it takes you. We're all rooting for you for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Good to talk to you.